The most corrupted families by consanguinity. In the Appalachian Mountains, the real myth of vampires. A dark truth lies deep within the isolated hollows of America's oldest mountain range, a truth that few dare to speak. A legacy of bloodlines so entwined they created their own mythology. This is not a tale of supernatural creatures, but of something far more real and disturbing, the devastating consequences when families turn inward upon themselves, creating bloodlines so concentrated they birthed legends of the undead. During the harsh winter of 1887, in the remote regions of eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, locals began whispering of the blue people who emerged only at dusk, their skin an unnatural shade that seemed to glow in the dying light. This was the Cold Waters clan, whose isolation in the deeply wooded valleys of Harlan County had led to generations of intermarriage with close relatives. Fear and fascination among neighboring communities were sparked by their unusual appearance. Lacking scientific understanding, these communities created folklore to explain what they witnessed. "The Cold Waters ain't right," recalled Samuel Hatfield, whose 1889 journal entries provide some of the earliest documentation. "Their skin's the color of twilight and they avoid the sun like it burns them. Folks say they've been marrying brother to sister, cousin to cousin for nigh on 4 generations now. The young ones are born strange. Some can't speak proper. Others have eyes that don't look human. When they smile, their gums pull back, showing teeth that seem too sharp." A natural barrier had long been served by the Appalachian Mountains with their vast wilderness and treacherous terrain, creating pockets of humanity that existed in remarkable isolation. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Further into the hills away from the industrialization and social changes sweeping the nation, many families retreated in the post-Civil War era. For the Cold Waters, this isolation became a prison of their own making. "The Coldwater family presents a most curious medical phenomenon," wrote local physician Dr. Edmund Clark, who documented several cases in his medical journal. "Their bluish skin is unlike anything described in current medical literature. Upon examining several family members, I have noted abnormal heart rhythms, unusual blood consistency, and pronounced sensitivity to sunlight. Most disturbing are the malformations evident in the youngest generation, joint deformities, skull asymmetry, and cognitive impairments that appear to worsen with each successive generation." Their homestead was established in 1831 by the family patriarch, Isaiah Coldwater, after migrating from Virginia. Historical records indicate Isaiah arrived with his wife Sarah, who was also his first cousin, and their 3 children. As the family grew, opportunities for marriage outside the clan diminished. A pattern of first-cousin marriages had begun by the 1850s, a pattern the Cold Waters would continue for decades. By the 1880s, more disturbing unions were rumored, including relationships between half-siblings. What the mountain communities didn't understand was that the Cold Waters suffered from a rare genetic condition, methemoglobinemia, caused by a recessive gene that reduced the oxygen-carrying capacity of their blood, giving their skin its distinctive blue cast. This condition, combined with other genetic disorders resulting from consanguinity, created the perfect storm of symptoms that aligned eerily with folk descriptions of vampires: sensitivity to sunlight, abnormal appearance, blood disorders, and developmental issues that locals interpreted as unnatural hungers or curses. Speculation was only fueled by the Cold Waters' reclusive nature. At dusk or after nightfall, they conducted most of their business, avoiding the sun that caused painful rashes on their sensitive skin. A preference for rare meat, recommended by a traveling doctor to address their constant fatigue and weakness, was misconstrued as a bloodthirst. Whispers of unnatural relations and corrupted blood were created by their tendency to marry young and exclusively within their own family. "They keep to themselves, and that's for the best," said local shopkeeper Eliza Thompson in an 1891 account. "I only see the Coldwater men after sunset, coming to trade for supplies. They're polite enough, but there's something in their eyes, a wildness like animals. And their children. Lord have mercy on those poor souls. Some born with twisted limbs, others who never learn to speak right. That's what happens when blood gets too close," my grandmother would say. Nature finds a way to punish what ain't natural. Decades later, the truth behind the Coldwater family's condition would be understood. In their time, they were simply viewed as victims of their own corrupt bloodline, living examples of what happens when families violate natural law. Their prison ultimately became the isolation that initially protected them. With each generation growing more physically compromised than the last, the Coldwater homestead housed 4 generations by 1892, Ancient Isaiah, now in his 80s, his children and their spouses, most of whom were cousins, their children, many married to their own first cousins, and a 4th generation that bore the most severe manifestations of their genetic inheritance. The focus of medical investigation and local horror would become this 4th generation, children with severe deformities, mental impairments, and, in some cases, violent behavioral issues that the family struggled to contain. Just one chapter in the hidden history of consanguinity in the Appalachian Mountains is represented by the story of the Coldwaters. A practice born not of depravity, but of isolation, ignorance, and necessity. Yet, a uniquely American vampire myth would be spawned by their legacy. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. One grounded not in supernatural evil, but in the all-too-human tragedy of bloodlines turned inward upon themselves. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because forever wondering what dark secrets still hide in the mountains of Appalachia today is what you'll be left with if you miss these real historical accounts of America's most isolated families. A perfect storm of genetic concentration had been created by the Coldwater family's isolation in the Appalachian wilderness. By 1890, within their secluded compound of rough-hewn cabins connected by dirt paths, over 40 family members lived in what amounted to a small, self-contained village. A community where nearly everyone shared not just one common ancestor, but multiple overlapping bloodlines was presided over by the oldest generation, Isaiah and his few surviving siblings and cousins. A disturbing pattern of marriages is revealed by historical records from the Harlan County Courthouse. Between 1840 and 1890, 23 marriage licenses were issued to Coldwater family members. Of these, 17 were between first cousins, 4 between second cousins, and 2 between uncle and niece, relationships that were technically legal but strongly discouraged even in that era. The unofficial unions that locals whispered about, half-siblings who produced children together, and other relationships too close to acknowledge publicly, were what the records couldn't show. Clinical observations of what happens when genetic material becomes too concentrated within a family were provided by Dr. Clark's medical journal. A catalogue of abnormalities that cannot be coincidental is presented by the Coldwater infants. Of the 12 births I have attended in this family over the past decade, 9 children exhibited significant physical or mental defects. 3 did not survive their first year. The unmistakable marks of their heritage are borne by those who live. Not just the distinctive blue skin, but malformed limbs, misshapen skulls, and eyes set too wide or too close. Their blood itself appears abnormal under microscopic examination, the corpuscles misshapen and functioning poorly. What Dr. Clark was documenting, though he lacked the scientific terminology, were the effects of recessive genetic disorders that flourish when close relatives reproduce. Just the most visible of their genetic burdens was the Coldwater's methemoglobinemia, their blue skin. Others included hemophilia, which caused uncontrollable bleeding from minor injuries, porphyria, which created extreme sensitivity to sunlight and could lead to hallucinations, and various developmental disorders that affected cognition, behavior, and physical development. Family rules that kept them separate from the surrounding communities had been established by Isaiah Coldwater, the patriarch. "We keep to our own," he reportedly told his children and grandchildren. "Outsiders don't understand our ways. They fear what's different. Our blood is special. It needs to stay pure." A cornerstone of Coldwater family identity became this notion of pure blood, even as it led to their physical deterioration. By 1893, impossible to ignore had become the consequences of this ideology. Children who couldn't walk until age 5 or 6, who never developed speech beyond primitive vocalizations, and who exhibited violent outbursts that family members struggled to control were included in the youngest generation of Coldwaters. The physical changes that seemed to intensify with each generation were most disturbing to outside observers: elongated canine teeth, actually a dental condition called hyperdontia, sensitivity to light that forced some family members to live in near darkness, and dietary restrictions that led to rumors of strange appetites. The youngest cold water boy, can't rightly recall his name, came into my store last fall with his father, reported shopkeeper Thomas Wilson. Couldn't have been more than 12, but there was something old in his face. His skin wasn't just blue like the others, it was near translucent, like you could see the veins working underneath. His eyes wouldn't settle, darting around like an animal's. When I handed him a peppermint stick, his hand shook so bad he dropped it. His father apologized, said the boy had the family weakness in his joints. But it wasn't just weakness. I saw it was something broken in how he was made. Another source of local speculation became the family's diet. Due to their chronic anemia, another consequence of their genetic disorders, cold water family members craved iron-rich foods. Large quantities of organ meats, particularly liver, were consumed by them, and they drank tonics containing beef blood prescribed by Dr. Clark to address their weakness. To outside observers, grotesque and unnatural seemed their dietary preferences. More liver and heart than anyone ought to eat is bought by them, said local butcher James Harmon. Isaiah's eldest boy, Ephraim, comes in twice weekly for 5 or 6 pounds of raw liver. Says they barely cook it, just warm it through. That ain't natural eating. When I suggested he try regular cuts of meat, he just smiled with those strange teeth of his and said, "Only blood builds blood, Mr. Harmon." Gave me a chill right down my spine, the way he said it. Further isolated from the community were the cold water's nocturnal habits. With several family members unable to tolerate sunlight due to porphyria and related conditions, the family conducted most of their business after sunset. Unusually small windows covered with heavy curtains featured in their homes, and family members who ventured out during daylight wore wide-brimmed hats, long sleeves, and gloves regardless of the weather. Rhymes warning about the family were created by local children. Asterisk, blue face, sharp tooth, cold water's coming after youth. Hide away before the night, or you'll never see the light. Asterisk, the community's growing unease with the family in their midst was reflected by such playground verses, an unease that would eventually erupt into open hostility. A community meeting to discuss the cold water situation, as it was delicately termed, was held in August 1894 by the neighboring town of Pineville. The depth of local concerns is revealed by the meeting minutes, preserved in the County Historical Society. Reverend Miller raised the question of whether Christian charity requires intervention in the cold water family situation, given reports of children born with grievous deformities and kept hidden from public view. Dr. Clark advised that their condition stems from too close bloodlines rather than moral failings, but acknowledged the practice violates natural law. Sheriff Wilson noted no laws have been broken that would warrant official action, though he expressed personal disgust at their marriage practices. No formal action concluded the meeting, but unofficial social sanctions intensified. Local businesses began refusing to serve cold water family members. Children were warned away from the family's property. When 3 livestock were found dead on neighboring farms with what appeared to be puncture wounds to their necks, likely the work of wild predators, the cold waters were immediately implicated by rumors. To withdraw further, becoming almost entirely self-sufficient on their mountain property, was the family's response. Their own crops were grown by them, livestock was raised, and they ventured into town only when absolutely necessary. However, their genetic predicament was only worsened by this increased isolation, as younger family members had even fewer options for marriage outside the immediate family. A breaking point was reached by the situation in 1895 when Ephraim Coldwater's youngest daughter, Ruth, born of his union with his first cousin, died at age 9. A child who never developed beyond the intellectual capacity of a toddler, suffered chronic seizures, and required constant care is described by Dr. Clark's notes. Not the usual bluish tint, but an almost transparent quality, revealing a network of veins that appeared black rather than blue was exhibited by her skin. Uncontrollable bleeding from her nose and mouth, a symptom consistent with the family's blood disorder, resulted from her death after a particularly violent seizure. A turning point for the Coldwater family was marked by Ruth's death. Isaiah, now approaching his 90s and reportedly showing signs of dementia, became convinced that the family's blood was not purifying as he had believed, but weakening. For his youngest grandchildren and great-grandchildren, he began to seek outside marriages, a desperate attempt to introduce new genetic material into the failing bloodline. But finding willing marriage partners was made nearly impossible by decades of rumors, isolation, and visible evidence of genetic decline. The consequences of violating natural laws understood in the 19th century had become personified by the cold waters, a living embodiment. Their tragedy was not supernatural, but entirely human, a cautionary tale of isolation, ignorance, and the devastating price of turning inward rather than outward for human connection.